Standard gardening wisdom says you have to wait 6 months for nature to turn waste into black gold. But in a small corner of a Pennsylvania farm, a pile of steaming organic matter is defying the laws of biological decay. While your neighbors are turning their plastic bins once a month and hopping for the best, this specific method is churning out finished, nutrient-dense compost in exactly 14 days. Most people think of composting as a slow, passive rot, a waiting game played against the seasons. But what if the delay isn't a biological necessity, but a management failure? The Amish don't use high-tech sensors or chemical accelerants to cheat the clock. They use a precise, mechanical layering system that turns a backyard heap into a biological furnace. If you walk past one of these piles on a crisp morning, you won't smell the sour scent of decay. You'll see a thick pillar of steam rising into the air, even in the dead of winter. But here, where it gets interesting. To understand why this works, you have to stop looking at compost as a pile of trash and start seeing it as a living, breathing engine. Most gardeners kill this engine before it even starts by suffocating it. They toss kitchen scraps on top of grass clippings and create a wet, anaerobic mat that prevents oxygen from reaching the core. It's like trying to start a fire by dumping a bucket of water on a single match. The 14-day method flips this on its head. It relies on a specific ratio that feels almost counterintuitive when you first see it. You aren't just mixing greens and browns, you are building a skyscraper of airflow. The foundation starts with the roughage, thick, carbon-heavy stalks or brush at the very bottom. This isn't for nutrients, it's for plumbing. This layer creates a vacuum effect, drawing cool air up into the center of the pile as the heat begins to rise. Without this bottom vent, the entire system stalls. Imagine a city where the waste department only works once a year. That's a standard compost pile. In the 14-day method, we are forcing the workforce, the thermophilic bacteria, into a 24-hour overtime shift. These bacteria are the elite athletes of the microscopic world. They don't survive in your average, lukewarm compost bin. They only show up when the internal temperature hits a blistering 150 degrees Fahrenheit. At this heat, weed seeds are sterilized, pathogens are cooked away, and tough cellulose is shattered in days. But there's a catch. These bacteria are so efficient that they can literally breathe themselves to death. They consume oxygen at such a staggering rate that the center of the pile becomes a dead zone within 48 hours. This is why the wait-and-see approach takes 6 months. The bacteria are constantly dying off and waiting for slow pockets of air to reach them. To hit the 2-week mark, you have to intervene. And this changes everything. On day 4, the pile must be completely inverted. The skin of the pile that stayed cool must become the new core. The scalding center is moved to the perimeter. By physically moving the material, you aren't just mixing, you are reoxygenating the entire engine. When you do this, you'll notice something startling. The center of the pile isn't brown anymore. It's covered in a white, ash-like substance. This isn't mold. It's actinomycetes, a higher form of bacteria that signals the breakdown is happening at peak velocity. But why don't we see this in commercial farming or modern suburban backyards? The answer is simple. It requires a level of attention that modern convenience has phased out. It's easier to buy a bag of synthetic fertilizer than it is to spend 20 minutes every other day with a pitchfork. We've traded biological speed for physical ease, and in the process, we've lost the ability to close the loop on our own waste. The logic of the 14-day cycle is rooted in the Berkeley method, but refined by generations of farmers who couldn't afford to wait for a slow bin. It's a game of moisture control. If the pile is too dry, the bacteria go dormant. If it's too wet, they drown. The secret test is a simple squeeze. The material should feel like a wrung-out sponge. Just one drop of water should escape when you clench it in your fist. By day 8, the volume of the pile will have dropped by nearly 30%. The heat is still intense, but the texture is shifting. The identifiable scraps, the banana peels, the straw, the coffee grounds are vanishing into a uniform dark mass. That's not the full story, though. The real magic happens in the final turn on day 12. At this point, the intense heat begins to mellow. The elite thermophilic bacteria have done their job, and now the cooling phase begins. This is where the nutrients are stabilized. If you use the compost too early while it's still hot, it can actually burn the roots of your plants because the nitrogen hasn't finished its chemical transformation. By day 14, the transformation is total. What started as a messy heap of yard waste has become a crumbly, earthy-smelling humus. It's a concentrated dose of life that can transform dead, sandy soil into a thriving ecosystem in a single season. We've been taught that nature is slow, that we are at the mercy of the seasons. But the Amish method proves that when you understand the underlying mechanics of life, you can compress months into days. It's not about working against nature. It's about providing the perfect conditions for nature to work at its highest potential. The real question isn't whether you can make compost in 2 weeks. It's why we ever settled for waiting 6 months in the first place. When you hold that finished soil in your hands, you realize that waste is just a lack of imagination. The black gold was always there, hidden in the scraps, just waiting for the right amount of air and heat to set it free. If we can reclaim this one small cycle in our own backyards, it forces us to wonder what other slow processes in our lives are just waiting for a change in perspective. The result of this 14-day sprint is more than just a pile of dirt. It's a biological reset for the land. When you spread this high-speed compost over a garden bed, you aren't just adding nutrients. You are inoculating the soil with a massive, diverse army of microorganisms that act as a natural defense system for your plants. It turns a vulnerable garden into a self-sustaining fortress. But here's the kicker: this isn't just about the soil. The industrial food system relies on a one-way street extracting nutrients from the earth, shipping them miles away, and tossing the remains into a landfill where they produce methane, a gas 25 times more potent at trapping heat than carbon dioxide. By mastering the 14-day turn, you aren't just a gardener, you become a carbon-sequestering technician. You are taking a linear path to destruction and bending it back into a circle. It feels like a hidden truth because, in a world of instant gratification, we've forgotten that the most powerful technologies are often biological, not digital. We look for complicated solutions to soil health while the answer is sitting in our grass clippings and kitchen scraps, waiting for a little bit of friction and a lot of oxygen. That's not the full story, though. The true value of the Amish method isn't the speed, it's the independence. When you can generate your own high-grade fertilizer in the time it takes to receive an online shipment, the supply chain loses its grip on your food security. You stop being a consumer of fertility and start being a producer of it. As you stand over your steaming pile on that final day, the heat finally fading into a rich, cool dampness, the realization hits home. We don't need more chemicals, and we don't need more complex machinery. We simply need to stop getting in the way of the natural world's hunger to rebuild itself. Nature is ready to move at a blistering pace, provided we are willing to pick up the pitchfork and keep up. This shift in speed changes how you see every waste product in your life not as a burden to be hauled away, but as energy waiting for a catalyst. And once you've seen a pile of trash turn into life-giving soil in just a fortnight, you have to ask yourself, what other cycles in your world are you inadvertently slowing down? The true impact of this method becomes visible not in the compost pile, but in the plants that consume it. Most store-bought fertilizers offer a sudden spike of nitrogen that makes a plant look green and lush, but leaves its cellular structure weak and prone to disease. In contrast, this 14-day biological fuel provides a slow-release, complex buffet of minerals and enzymes. The result is a plant with thicker cell walls, deeper root systems, and a natural resistance to pests that would decimate a chemically fed garden. But there's a catch that most people miss until it's too late. If you stop at just one pile, you're missing the structural genius of the Amish farm. They don't just build a pile, they build a rotation. By starting a new heap every 3 to 4 days, they create a continuous conveyor belt of fertility. While one pile is in its fire phase, another is cooling, and a third is being harvested. It is a perpetual motion machine of organic renewal that ensures the soil never has to go hungry. This changes everything about how we view the work of a farm. We often think of farming as a struggle against depletion, a constant race to put back what the harvest took out. But when you master this 14-day loop, you realize that depletion is an illusion. You aren't losing nutrients. You are simply moving them through different states of matter. The energy that was in your dinner becomes the energy for your soil, which becomes the energy for your next harvest. It's a closed-loop system that the modern world has largely abandoned in favor of the take-make-waste model. The reason this method remains a hidden truth isn't because it's a secret, but because it challenges the economic incentive of big agriculture. There is no profit for a corporation in a gardener who can manufacture their own top-tier soil for free using only a pitchfork and a bit of sweat. The system is designed to keep you buying the bag, rather than building the pile. Yet, as you watch your garden transform, the logic becomes undeniable. You start to see the world through the eyes of the microorganisms. You realize that waste is just a human concept, a word we use for resources we're too lazy to manage. In the 14-day method, there is no waste, only potential energy waiting for a turn. The transformation of your backyard is just the beginning. Once you understand that you can accelerate life itself through simple, mechanical rhythms, the artificial boundaries between natural and managed begin to dissolve. True mastery isn't about controlling nature, it's about becoming a seamless part of its most essential cycles. Now that you know how to turn the clock forward on decay, you have to decide if you're ready to step into that cycle yourself. The real secret isn't just in the 14 days, it's in what happens to the person holding the pitchfork. The transformation of your garden is just the first domino. When the heat finally leaves the pile and the dark, crumbly humus is ready to be spread, you aren't just looking at dirt, you're looking at time compressed. Most people spend their lives waiting for things to happen, but the 14-day method proves that with the right sequence, you can dictate the pace of growth itself. But here, where it gets truly profound. When you apply this finished compost, you're not just feeding a plant, you're restructuring the very earth beneath your feet. This high-speed organic matter acts like a biological glue, binding loose sand or heavy clay into a crumb structure that can hold hundreds of times its weight in water. In a world of unpredictable droughts and eroding topsoil, this isn't just gardening, it's climate insurance. And this changes everything about your self-reliance. If you can produce this level of fertility at home, you've effectively opted out of a global chemical supply chain that is as fragile as it is expensive. While others are staring at rising prices for synthetic NPK fertilizers, you are turning a problem your household waste into the world's most valuable resource. You've bypassed the industrial middleman entirely. But why isn't this the standard everywhere? The truth is, our modern landscape is built for convenience, not for cycles. We've designed cities to hide our waste and suburbs to prioritize pristine, sterile lawns over productive, living soil. The 14-day method requires a mental shift from consumer to steward. It asks for 10 minutes of your time every other day, which in a culture of set it and forget it, feels like a radical act of rebellion. That's not the full story, though. The real insight isn't that you can make compost quickly, it's that nature is constantly trying to heal itself, and usually we are the only thing standing in the way. By layering correctly and turning the pile, you aren't making anything. You are simply removing the obstacles, the lack of air, the imbalance of moisture that prevent life from exploding into existence. When you hold that final, earthy-smelling result, you realize that the Amish haven't found a hack. They've simply maintained a conversation with the earth that the rest of us stopped having a century ago. The 14-day cycle is a reminder that we don't have to be victims of a slow, depleting system. We have the tools, the biology, and the logic to turn the tide of our own small ecosystems in less time than it takes for a moon to transition. The black gold was never out of reach, it was just waiting for you to provide the spark. Now that you've seen how quickly the earth can renew itself, it's worth asking, what other cycles in your life are you currently leaving to rot in the dark? If you're ready to see how this biological speed can be applied to the very food you eat, you might be surprised by what happens when you apply this same logic to the seeds themselves. The ultimate realization of the 14-day method isn't found in the temperature of the pile or the speed of the rot. It's found in the total disappearance of trash from your vocabulary. When you walk back into your kitchen with an empty bin, you stop seeing potato peels and coffee grounds as debris to be hidden. You see them as raw fuel for a high-performance engine. Most of us have been conditioned to believe that we are separate from the cycles of the earth, that we are merely observers of a slow, indifferent process. But when you physically intervene in that pile, you realize that humans were never meant to be bystanders. We are the catalysts. But here's the part that stays with you. In the 14 days it took to transform your waste, a commercial landfill would have barely settled an inch, trapping that same organic matter in a tomb where it would sit for decades, doing nothing but leaking methane. By stepping in, you've liberated that energy. You've taken a process that usually takes a human lifetime to happen underground and finished it before your next utility bill arrived. And this changes everything about your footprint on this planet. The Amish method isn't just a gardening hack because it saves time. It's a survival strategy because it restores the one thing that modern civilization is currently losing: topsoil. We are losing it at a rate 10 times faster than it can be replaced by natural, passive methods. This 14-day logic is the only way to close that gap. It feels like a hidden truth because our current economy isn't built on loops, it's built on lines. It's built on buying a product, using it, and discarding it. The 14-day turn breaks that line and forces it into a circle. It is a quiet, steaming act of defiance against a world that tells you that you are helpless to fix the environment. That's not the full story, though. The real power of this method is that it scales. Whether you have a 5-acre farm or a 5-foot balcony, the physics of thermophilic bacteria remain the same. The air requirements don't change. The moisture levels don't change. The biology doesn't care about your zip code. It only cares about the conditions you provide. By the time you spread that final, dark, crumbly earth onto your plants, you aren't just a gardener anymore. You're an alchemist. You've taken the lowest, most discarded parts of your life and turned them into the highest form of biological wealth. Nature isn't slow, it's just waiting for a partner who knows how to keep the fire burning. The black gold in your hands is proof that the most complex problems often have the simplest, most grounded solutions. All it takes is a shift in perspective, a bit of moisture, and the willingness to turn the pile. Now that you know how to master the speed of decay, the only question left is what you'll do with the time you've gained. If you're ready to see how this same accelerated logic can transform your entire harvest, you'll want to see what happens when you apply these hidden rhythms to the way you plant. The 14-day transformation from kitchen scraps to black gold isn't a miracle of chemistry, it is a masterclass in biological efficiency. By simply managing the breath and the heat of the earth, we stop being passive observers of decay and start becoming active participants in the planet's renewal. The Amish method reminds us that nature isn't inherently slow, it is simply waiting for us to provide the right conditions to explode into life. But here's the final, hidden truth. We live in a culture that treats soil like dirt and waste like a burden to be buried. We've been told that fixing the environment requires massive, high-tech industrial shifts, yet the most potent tool for carbon sequestration and food security is sitting in your backyard, steaming at 150 degrees. When you master this 2-week cycle, you aren't just saving time, you are reclaiming a lost piece of human sovereignty. And this changes the way you look at everything. The black gold crumbling through your fingers is more than fertilizer, it is proof that we can close the loop on our own existence. It is the realization that true wealth isn't bought in a plastic bag, it is built with a pitchfork and a bit of moisture. The transition from consumer to steward happens the moment you realize that nothing is truly thrown away, it is only moved from one state of energy to another. That's not the full story, though. The real shift happens when you stop seeing your garden as a hobby and start seeing it as a heartbeat. The 14-day rhythm becomes a new way of living, a constant reminder that we have the power to accelerate healing wherever we find depletion. The earth is ready to move at a blistering pace to support us. The only question is whether we are finally ready to keep up. Nature has already provided the engine, it's just waiting for you to turn the key. If you're ready to see how this same accelerated logic can transform the very seeds you plant in this soil, you'll want to see what happens when you apply these hidden rhythms to the way you start your harvest.